Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The Terran Empire was once a beacon of human achievement, a shining example of what could be accomplished when humanity united under a common cause. But that was centuries ago. Now, in the year 2876, the empire was fractured, its colonies divided and in constant conflict. Rival states had emerged from the ashes of the once great empire, each vying for control, power, and resources. The central government on Terra, once the heart of the empire, was a shadow of its former self, barely holding on to control of the core systems. General Marcus Tiberius stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, his gaze fixed on the stars. He was a man of imposing stature, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of countless battles. His once black hair was streaked with gray, the lines on his face etched by years of war and loss. But his eyes, a piercing blue, remained sharp and resolute. He had seen more than his share of bloodshed, and he knew that the greatest battle of his life was yet to come. The attack on Nova Europa had been a disaster. Millions dead, the colony reduced to rubble by the relentless assault of the Zarkan Empire. The Zarkans were a race of terrifying efficiency, their technology far surpassing anything humanity had to offer. They had been encroaching on human territory for years, their presence a constant, looming threat. But the attack on Nova Europa was different. It was an open declaration of war, a sign that the Zarkans no longer feared humanity. Marcus had watched the reports come in, the images of destruction flashing across the screens. He had seen the fear in the eyes of the Senate, the uncertainty in their voices as they debated what to do next. But Marcus knew that debates and diplomacy would not save humanity. The colonies were divided, and the Zarkans would exploit that division to tear them apart, one by one. As the reports ended, Marcus made his decision. He would not sit idly by while humanity was torn asunder. He would do what was necessary to unite the colonies, to forge a new Terran empire that could stand against the Zarkan threat. He would lead them, not as a general, but as an emperor. Admiral Drake, Marcus said, his voice steady and commanding. Admiral Sarah Drake turned to face him, her expression serious. She was a woman of sharp intellect and unyielding loyalty, her brown hair cut short in military fashion. She had served alongside Marcus for years, and there were few people he trusted more. Yes, General. We cannot afford to wait for the Senate to act, Marcus said. The colonies are divided, and the Zarkans will use that division against us. We must unite them, by any means necessary. Drake nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. You're planning to take matters into your own hands. I am, Marcus replied. I will not let humanity fall because of the weakness and indecision of our leaders. The time for debate is over. We need action. Drake considered his words carefully. She had always respected Marcus's decisiveness, but this was a bold move, even for him. And if the colonies resist? Then we will persuade them, Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. If persuasion fails, we will use force. The survival of our species is at stake, Sarah. We cannot afford to be gentle. Drake met his gaze, her expression unreadable. She knew Marcus was right, but the thought of forcing their own people into submission was troubling. Still, she trusted Marcus's judgment. I'll stand by you, Marcus. Whatever it takes. Thank you, Sarah, Marcus said, his voice softening. Your loyalty means more to me than you know. With Drake's support, Marcus began his campaign to unite the colonies. He started with the outer systems, where the threat of the Zarkans was most immediate. Some colonies, like New Horizon and Alpha Centauri, saw the wisdom in Marcus's plan and joined his coalition willingly. Others, like the industrial powerhouse of Titan, resisted, fearing the loss of their autonomy. On Titan, Marcus met with the colony's leaders, a council of powerful industrialists who had grown wealthy from the war economy. They were not interested in joining a new empire, not when they could continue to profit from selling weapons and supplies to whichever faction could pay the most. We appreciate your concerns, General, said Counselor Mathis, a portly man with a calculating gaze. But Titan has thrived by remaining independent. We see no reason to change that now. The Zarkans will see you as nothing more than another target, Marcus warned. Your independence won't protect you when they come for your factories. Mathis smiled, a thin, humorless expression. We have defenses, General. And if the Zarkans do come, we will negotiate. They are rational beings, after all. They are conquerors, Marcus corrected, his voice cold. And they do not negotiate with those they consider inferior. The council exchanged uneasy glances, but Mathis remained defiant. We will take our chances, General. Titan is not for sale. Marcus's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. He rose to his feet, signaling the end of the meeting. As he left the council chamber, Drake fell in step beside him. What now? She asked quietly. We take Titan by force, Marcus replied, his voice resolute. They've made their choice. Now we make ours. The assault on Titan was swift and brutal. Marcus's forces, hardened by years of warfare, overwhelmed the colony's defenses in a matter of hours. The council was arrested, and Marcus installed a military governor to oversee the colony's integration into the new empire. It was a harsh move, but one that sent a clear message to the other colonies. Resistance was futile. Word of the fall of Titan spread quickly, and the remaining colonies began to fall in line. Some joined willingly, swayed by the promise of protection and unity under Marcus's leadership. Others were less cooperative, but the threat of force was enough to bring them to heel. Within months, Marcus had forged a new coalition, one that spanned from the outermost colonies to the core systems, but not everyone was content to follow Marcus. In the shadows, a conspiracy was brewing, led by those who saw Marcus's rise as a threat to their own power. At the center of this conspiracy was Commander Lucius Kane, a former rival of Marcus who had joined the coalition reluctantly after his home colony was threatened by the Zarkans. Kane was a man of ambition, driven by a desire for power that matched Marcus's own. But where Marcus sought to unite humanity against a common enemy, Kane sought to use the chaos to his advantage. He saw an opportunity to seize control of the new empire, to place himself at its head. The conspiracy came to a head aboard the Resolute, the flagship of Marcus's fleet. Kane and his co-conspirators planned to launch a coup, to overthrow Marcus and take control of the fleet. But their plans were uncovered by Admiral Drake, who brought the information to Marcus. Lucius Kane is a traitor, Drake said, her voice tinged with anger. He's planning to take the fleet and declare himself emperor. Marcus's expression darkened. He had known Kane was ambitious, but he had underestimated the man's treachery. How many are with him? Enough to be a threat, Drake replied. But we still have the advantage. If we act quickly, we can put this down before it spreads. Then we act now, Marcus said, his voice cold and determined. Kane has made his choice. He will face the consequences. The confrontation on the Resolute was swift and decisive. Marcus's loyalists moved in, taking the traitors by surprise. The ship's corridors echoed with the sound of gunfire and the clash of blades as Marcus's forces fought to retake control. In the heart of the ship, Marcus confronted Kane. The two men faced each other in the dimly lit command center, the air thick with tension. You should have stayed loyal, Lucius, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. You could have been part of something great. Kane sneered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. I have no interest in being a pawn in your empire, Marcus. You're no better than the Senate you despise. You talk about unity, but all you want is power. Marcus drew his own sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light. Power is necessary to protect humanity. You're too blinded by your own ambition to see that. The two men clashed, their swords meeting with a resounding clang. Kane was a skilled fighter, but Marcus was relentless, his strikes fueled by years of battle-hardened experience. The duel was brutal, neither man willing to give an inch, but in the end, it was Marcus who emerged victorious. With a final, decisive blow, he disarmed Kane and drove his sword through the man's chest. Kane's eyes widened in shock as he staggered back, blood spilling from the wound. "You won't last," Kane gasped, his voice weakening as he fell to his knees. "Someone will take your place." Marcus knelt beside him, his expression cold. "Perhaps. But it won't be you." With those final words, Kane slumped forward, lifeless. Marcus rose to his feet, blood dripping from his sword. The coup had been quashed, but the cost was high. The battle had left the Resolute scarred, and the threat of further descent loomed large, but Marcus knew there was no turning back. Marcus knew there was no turning back. The path he had chosen was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it was the only path that offered a chance for humanity's survival. With Kane's rebellion crushed, the threat of internal dissent was quelled, for now. The coalition was stronger, its leaders more unified in their resolve. But Marcus understood that this was only the beginning. The true test would come not from within, but from the looming Zarkan threat that had yet to be fully confronted. As the Resolute sailed through the blackness of space, its crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage inflicted during the coup. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a renewed sense of purpose among the soldiers and officers. They had witnessed their leader's strength and decisiveness, and it had inspired a fierce loyalty. Marcus knew he could rely on them when the time came for the final confrontation. The Terran Empire was officially declared, and Marcus took on the mantle of Emperor with a heavy heart. He had never sought power for its own sake. His goal was to protect humanity, to ensure its survival against the overwhelming force of the Zarkans. The coronation was a simple affair, conducted aboard the Resolute with only his closest allies in attendance. There were no grand celebrations, no public addresses. Marcus knew that time was of the essence. Every moment spent in ceremony was a moment lost in preparation for the war that was fast approaching. Admiral Drake stood by his side, her presence a constant source of strength. She had been with him through thick and thin, her unwavering loyalty and sharp intellect invaluable in navigating the treacherous waters of politics and war. Together, they devised a plan that would take the fight directly to the Zarkans. The key to victory lay in the Orion Nebula, a region of space that was both strategically vital and fiercely contested. The Zarkans had established a formidable presence in the nebula, using its dense clouds of gas and dust as cover for their operations. Marcus knew that if the Terran Empire could seize control of the nebula, it would cut off the Zarkan supply lines and give humanity a fighting chance. But it would not be an easy task. The Zarkans were prepared for an assault, and the battle would be fierce and bloody. As the fleet approached the Orion Nebula, the tension aboard the Resolute was palpable. The soldiers and officers knew what was at stake, and they were ready to give their all. Marcus addressed them from the command center, his voice steady and confident. "Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for all of humanity," he said, his words echoing through the ship's corridors. "The Zarkans believe they can crush us, that we will fall like so many before us. But they are wrong. We are Terrans, and we do not yield. We will fight with every ounce of strength we have, and we will show the Zarkans that humanity is not so easily conquered. For the Empire." A resounding cheer erupted from the crew, their spirits lifted by their leader's words. The time for speeches was over. Now, it was time for action. The battle began with a series of probing attacks, testing the Zarkan defenses. The nebula's dense clouds made it difficult to detect the enemy's movements, and the Zarkans used this to their advantage, launching ambushes from unexpected angles. The Terran fleet responded with disciplined precision, countering the Zarkan strikes and slowly advancing deeper into the nebula. As the battle raged on, Marcus found himself at the center of the storm. He coordinated the fleet's movements, directing strikes and counterstrikes with a calm efficiency that belied the chaos around him. Admiral Drake was by his side, her tactical brilliance on full display as she devised strategies to outmaneuver the Zarkans, but the Zarkans were relentless. They had no intention of letting the Terrans gain a foothold in the nebula, and they threw everything they had into the fight. Wave after wave of Zarkan ships descended on the Terran fleet, their advanced weaponry wreaking havoc. The Resolute shook under the impact of enemy fire, but Marcus remained composed, his focus unshaken. As the battle reached its peak, Marcus realized that a decisive move was needed. The Zarkan flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons, had positioned itself at the heart of the nebula, coordinating the enemy forces. If the flagship could be destroyed, it would throw the Zarkans into disarray and give the Terrans the advantage they needed, but the Zarkan flagship was heavily guarded, surrounded by a protective screen of smaller vessels. Any attempt to breach that screen would result in catastrophic losses. Marcus knew the risks, but he also knew that there was no other way. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice if necessary. "I'm taking a strike team," Marcus said, turning to Drake. "We'll board the flagship and take it out from the inside." Drake's eyes widened in alarm. "Marcus, that's suicide. Let me send in a commando unit. You're too valuable to risk." "This isn't up for debate, Sarah," Marcus replied, his tone firm. "If we don't destroy that flagship, we lose the battle, and the war. I won't ask my men to do something I'm not willing to do myself." Drake hesitated, torn between her loyalty to Marcus and her duty to the fleet. But she knew there was no stopping him once he had made up his mind. "At least let me come with you," she said, her voice resolute. Marcus nodded, appreciating her determination. "Very well. We'll lead the team together." The strike team was assembled quickly, a hand-picked group of elite soldiers equipped with the best technology the Terran Empire had to offer. They boarded a small, heavily armored shuttle, designed to breach the enemy's defenses and deliver them to the heart of the Zarkan flagship. The shuttle launched from the Resolute under heavy fire, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield. The Zarkan ships closed in, but the shuttle's advanced shielding held, deflecting the worst of the enemy's attacks. The tension inside the shuttle was palpable as the strike team prepared for the imminent confrontation. The shuttle punched through the Zarkan defenses, its landing gear scraping against the hull of the flagship as it made contact. The soldiers moved quickly, breaching the airlock and storming into the enemy ship. The corridors of the flagship were filled with the alien architecture of the Zarkans, a labyrinth of sleek, organic designs that glowed with an eerie blue light. The Zarkans were waiting for them. The strike team met heavy resistance as they advanced through the ship, fighting their way towards the central command center. The Zarkans were fearsome warriors, their physical strength and advanced weaponry making them formidable opponents. But the Terran soldiers fought with a desperation born of knowing that this was humanity's last, best hope. Marcus and Drake led the charge, their weapons cutting through the enemy ranks as they pressed forward. The fighting was intense, each step forward paid for in blood. But the strike team's determination was unshakable. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to turn back now. Finally, they reached the command center. The massive doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the heart of the Zarkan flagship. The command center was a vast chamber, dominated by a towering control console that pulsed with energy. Standing before the console was the Zarkan commander, a hulking figure clad in the ornate armor of his rank. The commander turned to face them, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He spoke in a language that was guttural and harsh, his voice filled with contempt. Marcus didn't need a translation to understand the meaning. They were intruders, and they would die here. The battle that followed was brutal. The Zarkan commander was a formidable opponent, his strength and speed surpassing anything Marcus had ever faced. But Marcus fought with the knowledge that humanity's survival depended on his victory. Every move was calculated, every strike delivered with precision and purpose. In the end, it was Marcus who prevailed. With a final, powerful blow, he drove his blade into the Zarkan commander's chest, the alien's eyes flickering with disbelief as he fell. Marcus pulled his weapon free, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he turned to the control console. "We need to disable this ship," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from exertion. "Sarah, see if you can overload the core." Drake moved quickly, her fingers flying over the controls as she accessed the ship's systems. The console responded with a series of alien symbols, the lights on the control panel flickering erratically. "I've set it to overload," Drake said, her voice tense. "We need to get out of here, now." The strike team didn't need to be told twice. They retreated through the corridors, racing back to their shuttle as the ship's systems began to fail. The walls shuddered with the force of the impending explosion, the lights dimming as power drained from the core. They reached the shuttle just as the first explosions rocked the ship. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and they blasted away from the flagship, speeding towards the safety of the Terran fleet. Behind them, the Zarkan flagship erupted in a massive fireball, the shockwave rippling through the nebula. The destruction of the flagship had the desired effect. The Zarkan forces, now leaderless and disorganized, began to falter. The Terran fleet pressed the advantage, their ships tearing through the enemy lines with renewed vigor. One by one, the Zarkan vessels were destroyed or forced to retreat, and the tide of battle shifted in favor of the Terrans. As the Resolute returned to the fleet, the crew erupted in cheers. They had achieved the impossible, defeated the Zarkan Empire in a battle that would be remembered for generations. Marcus stood on the bridge, looking out at the remnants of the battlefield. The cost had been high, but the victory was theirs. But as the celebrations began, Marcus felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. He knew that the battle for the Orion Nebula was only one part of a much larger war. The Zarkans were not defeated, merely driven back. The road ahead was long, and the challenges they would face were many. Drake approached him, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "We did it, Marcus. We won." Marcus nodded, his gaze distant. "We won this battle, Sarah. But the war isn't over." She placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him in the moment. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." Marcus looked at her, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. He knew she was right. They had come this far together, and they would continue to fight for the future of humanity, no matter the cost. As the Terran Empire celebrated its hard-won victory, Marcus knew that the real work was just beginning. He had united humanity under a common cause, forged an empire from the ashes of division. But maintaining that unity, guiding his people through the trials that lay ahead, that would be the true test of his leadership. The future of humanity was uncertain, but Marcus Tiberius would face it head-on, with unwavering resolve. He was the emperor of the Terran Empire, and he would do whatever it took to ensure its survival.